In the heart of a bustling city filled with skyscrapers and endless traffic, there lived a man named Richard. He was no ordinary man. Richard had built an empire through sheer determination and hard work. His name was well known in business circles, and his wealth was the envy of many. Yet despite his success, Richard carried a weight that no amount of money could lift. It wasn't the stress of running a company or the pressure of maintaining his luxurious lifestyle. It was something far deeper, something tied to his family. Richard's son, Ethan, was 8 years old, but unlike other children his age. Ethan had cerebral palsy, a condition that affected his ability to move and speak clearly. For Richard, seeing his son struggle every day was both heartbreaking and frustrating. He wanted nothing more than to help Ethan, but he didn't know how. Between board meetings, conference calls, and late-night work sessions, Richard barely had time for himself, let alone his son. The mansion they lived in felt cold and empty. Even though it was filled with expensive furniture, gadgets, and toys Ethan couldn't fully enjoy. Ethan's mother, Sarah, had left when Ethan was just a toddler. She couldn't handle the emotional toll of raising a child with special needs, and her departure left a gaping hole in their lives. Richard tried to fill that void by hiring caregivers and therapists, hoping someone else could step in where he couldn't. But none of them stayed long. Some found the job too demanding, while others simply didn't connect with Ethan. As a result, Ethan spent most of his days alone, staring out the window at the world he couldn't fully participate in. One evening, as Richard sat in his study, going over financial reports, he sighed heavily. His phone buzzed on the desk, a reminder from the agency he'd contacted weeks ago about finding a new nanny for Ethan. Reluctantly, he picked up the phone and dialed the number. After a brief conversation, the agency assured him they had found someone perfect for the role. Her name was Maya, and she came highly recommended. Though Richard wasn't hopeful, after all he'd heard similar promises before, he agreed to meet her the next morning. When Maya arrived at the mansion, Richard was immediately struck by her presence. She was tall and graceful, with warm, brown skin and eyes that seemed to hold stories untold. Dressed in simple yet elegant clothes, she greeted Richard with a firm handshake and a smile that reached her eyes. There was something about her that felt different from the others who had come before her. Richard couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he decided to give her a chance. Maya wasted no time getting to know Ethan. She walked into his room. Without hesitation, her steps light and confident. Ethan sat in his wheelchair near the window, gazing outside. When Maya approached him, she knelt down so she was at eye level. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, her voice gentle yet full of energy. "My name is Maya, and I'm here to be your friend." Ethan blinked slowly, his expression unreadable. Richard watched nervously from the doorway, unsure of what to expect. To his surprise, Maya didn't wait for Ethan to respond. Instead, she began talking to him as if they were old friends. She told him about her day, asked him questions, and even made funny faces to see if she could get a reaction. Slowly but surely, Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. It wasn't much, but for Richard it was like seeing sunlight after months of rain. He stood there, frozen, unable to believe what he was witnessing. No one, not a single caregiver or therapist, had managed to make Ethan smile like that before. Over the next few days, Maya settled into her role effortlessly. She brought life into the house, turning its once silent halls into spaces filled with laughter and music. Every morning, she played cheerful songs on a portable speaker, singing along as she helped Ethan with his daily routine. During meals, she encouraged Ethan to try feeding himself, patiently guiding his hands even when food spilled onto the table. At bedtime, she read him stories, her voice soothing and rhythmic. Richard noticed these changes but kept his distance, observing quietly from afar. What intrigued Richard most, however, was how Maya interacted with Ethan. Unlike previous caregivers who often treated him with pity or frustration, Maya spoke to him like he was any other child. She never talked down to him or avoided looking him in the eye. Instead, she treated him with respect and kindness, acknowledging his thoughts and feelings even if he couldn't express them verbally. Watching this dynamic unfold, Richard felt a mix of emotions: admiration, guilt, and curiosity. Who was this woman who could connect with his son so effortlessly? And why did she seem so different from everyone else? One evening, as Richard worked late in his study, he heard faint sounds coming from Ethan's room. Curiosity got the better of him, and he tiptoed down the hallway to investigate. Peering through the slightly ajar door, he saw Maya sitting beside Ethan's bed. She held his hand gently, whispering words that Richard couldn't quite hear. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, and her face glowed with tenderness. For a moment, Richard forgot to breathe. He had never seen anyone care for Ethan the way Maya did, with such genuine love and devotion. As he stood there watching, a memory surfaced in Richard's mind. Years ago, when Ethan was still a baby, Richard used to sit by his crib late at night, praying for his son's health and happiness. Back then, he promised himself he would do everything in his power to give Ethan the best life possible, but somewhere along the way he had lost sight of that promise. Work had consumed him and guilt had pushed him further away from his son. Now, standing in the dimly lit hallway, Richard realized how much he had missed, not just Ethan's smiles, but also the opportunity to truly understand him. That night, Richard went to bed with a heavy heart. Sleep eluded him as thoughts of Maya and Ethan swirled in his mind. He knew he needed answers, not just about Maya's background, but also about himself. Why had he allowed his career to overshadow his role as a father? What kind of man had he become? These questions haunted him, but deep down he sensed that Maya might hold the key to unlocking the truth. Little did he know, the journey ahead would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, resilience, and the meaning of family. As the days turned into weeks, Maya's presence in the household began to transform not just Ethan's life, but also the atmosphere of the entire mansion. The once sterile and silent halls now echoed with laughter, music, and the occasional sound of spilled juice being cleaned up with cheerful patience. Richard couldn't help but notice how Maya had brought warmth into a home that had felt cold for far too long. She wasn't just a caregiver, she was a beacon of light, filling spaces Richard hadn't realized were empty. Maya's routine with Ethan was unlike anything Richard had seen before. Each morning, she greeted Ethan with a big smile and a song, no matter how tired she might have been. "Good morning, sunshine," she would say, opening the curtains to let in the sunlight. "Today is going to be amazing. I can feel it." Ethan's eyes would widen slightly, as if he understood her enthusiasm even if he couldn't respond verbally. Maya never skipped a beat. If Ethan seemed uninterested or frustrated, she'd switch tactics, pulling out colorful books, soft toys, or even bubbles to capture his attention. Her creativity knew no bounds, and Richard found himself marveling at her ability to adapt. What truly amazed Richard, however, was how Maya managed to make everyday tasks fun for Ethan. Bath time, which used to be a struggle with previous caregivers, became an adventure. Maya filled the tub with floating toys and splashed water gently, making Ethan giggle, a sound Richard hadn't heard often enough. Mealtime, too, transformed under Maya's care. Instead of forcing Ethan to eat quickly, she turned it into a game, pretending spoons were airplanes flying toward his mouth. Sometimes food ended up on the floor, but Maya didn't mind. She simply laughed and said, "Oops, looks like we need a pit stop for cleaning duty." Richard began spending more time observing Maya and Ethan together, though he tried to stay out of sight. He told himself it was to ensure Maya was doing her job properly, but deep down, he knew he was learning from her. One afternoon, while sitting in the living room pretending to review documents, Richard watched as Maya helped Ethan paint pictures using adaptive tools designed for children with limited mobility. With Maya's guidance, Ethan dipped a sponge-tipped brush into bright colors and pressed it onto paper, creating abstract shapes that looked like masterpieces to Richard. When Ethan saw the finished artwork, his face lit up with pride. Maya clapped her hands and exclaimed, "Wow, Ethan, you're an artist." For the first time in years, Richard felt a pang of guilt, not because of what Maya was doing, but because of what he wasn't doing. Here was this woman who wasn't related to Ethan by blood, pouring her heart and soul into his happiness. And yet, Richard, Ethan's own father, had spent so much time hiding behind excuses and busyness. He realized he barely knew his son, the things that made him laugh, the activities he enjoyed, or the expressions that revealed his emotions. Watching Maya interact with Ethan so naturally made Richard feel both inspired and ashamed. One rainy afternoon, Richard decided to take a closer look at Maya's background. Though he trusted her completely, he wanted to understand why she seemed so different from anyone else who had cared for Ethan. Was it her training, her personality, or was there something deeper driving her compassion and dedication? Driven by curiosity, Richard accessed the security cameras installed throughout the house, a precaution he always took with new hires. As he reviewed footage from the past week, one particular clip caught his attention. It was late at night, long after Ethan had gone to bed. The camera showed Maya sitting by Ethan's bedside, holding his hand and speaking softly. Her voice was too low for the microphone to pick up clearly, but her body language spoke volumes. She leaned close to Ethan, her expression tender and loving, as if she were sharing secrets only the two of them could understand. Richard rewound the video and played it again, trying to decipher her words. Though he couldn't hear everything, snippets floated through. "You're strong, Ethan. Stronger than anyone knows. And one day, you'll show the world just how amazing you are." The scene tugged at Richard's heartstrings in ways he hadn't expected. He paused, the video staring at Maya's face on the screen. There was something profoundly personal about the way she connected with Ethan, almost as if she saw parts of herself in him. It was then that Richard decided to dig deeper. Using the contact information provided by the agency, he reached out to one of Maya's previous employers, a retired couple who had hired her years ago to care for their elderly mother. They raved about Maya's kindness, professionalism, and unwavering commitment. But when Richard asked about her personal life, they hesitated. "Well," the woman said thoughtfully, "Maya has been through a lot. She doesn't talk about it much, but we know she lost her teaching job due to budget cuts at the school where she worked. That must have been tough for her. She loved working with kids. And then there's her daughter." "Her daughter?" Richard interrupted, surprised. He hadn't known Maya had a child. "Yes," the woman continued. "Her daughter is grown now, but she faced some challenges growing up. Discrimination, mostly. People weren't always kind to her because of her race. Still, Maya never let bitterness take root. She taught her daughter resilience and grace, and I think those lessons shaped Maya into the person she is today." Hanging up the phone, Richard sat in stunned silence. The pieces began falling into place. Maya's strength, her empathy, her ability to see beyond limitations, it all stemmed from her own experiences. She wasn't just caring for Ethan, she was channeling her pain and triumphs into love and hope. For the first time, Richard understood why Maya treated Ethan not as a burden but as a gift. She saw potential where others saw obstacles, and she believed in possibilities others couldn't imagine. That evening, Richard approached Maya during dinner prep. She was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, humming a tune under her breath. Clearing his throat, Richard said, "Maya, can we talk for a moment?" She turned to face him, wiping her hands on a towel. "Of course, Mr. Richard. Is everything okay?" Richard hesitated, unsure of how to phrase his thoughts. Finally, he blurted out, "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for Ethan. He's happier than I've ever seen him, and I owe that to you." Maya smiled warmly. "Ethan is a wonderful boy, Mr. Richard. All I'm doing is helping him shine the way he deserves to." Her humility struck Richard deeply. He took a step closer, his voice softer. "I've noticed how much you care for him, and not just him, but everyone around you. I looked into your background a little, and I learned about your daughter and your struggles. I wanted you to know that I admire you, more than I can say." Maya's smile faltered for a moment, surprise flickering across her face. Then she nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Mr. Richard. Life hasn't always been easy, but I've learned that challenges shape us. They teach us to find beauty in unexpected places and to fight for what matters most. Ethan matters to me Not because it's my job, but because he reminds me of the goodness in the world. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Richard felt a lump rise in his throat. For years he had focused on building wealth and success, believing those were the keys to happiness. But standing in his kitchen, listening to Maya speak, with such sincerity he realized he had been chasing the wrong things. True fulfillment came from connection, from seeing people for who they truly were and valuing them not for what they could offer, but for the light they brought into the world. From that moment on, Richard vowed to change. He started spending more time at home, carving out hours in his schedule to be present for Ethan. At first it felt awkward. He wasn't used to playing games or reading stories, but Maya patiently guided him, showing him how to engage with Ethan in meaningful ways. Slowly, Richard began to see glimpses of the bond he had missed for so long. One evening, as he helped Ethan build a tower of blocks, the boy looked up at him and grinned, a wide, toothy smile that melted Richard's heart. In that instant, Richard understood what Maya had known all along. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about effort, patience, and presence. As weeks passed, Richard grew closer not only to Ethan but also to Maya. Their conversations extended beyond caregiving tips and daily routines. They talked about life, dreams, and the importance of giving back. Maya shared stories of her childhood, her passion for education, and her dream of opening a community center for underprivileged children. Listening to her, Richard felt a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps it was time to use his wealth not just for personal gain, but to make a difference in the lives of others. By the end of the second month, Richard's transformation was undeniable. The mansion no longer felt like a museum of luxury items. It felt like a home, a place filled with laughter, love, and hope. Maya had opened Richard's eyes to the beauty of resilience and the power of compassion. But little did he know, the journey was far from over. There were still lessons to be learned, bridges to be built, and hearts to be healed, including his own. As the weeks turned into months, Richard's newfound commitment to being present in Ethan's life began to bear fruit. The once distant father and son started forming a bond that neither of them had imagined possible. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were moments of frustration, misunderstandings, and even tears. But Maya was there every step of the way, guiding Richard with her gentle wisdom. Slowly but surely, Richard learned how to connect with Ethan on a deeper level, discovering joys he never knew existed. One morning, Richard woke up earlier than usual, determined to surprise Ethan by joining him for breakfast. He entered the kitchen just as Maya was setting the table with Ethan's favorite pancakes. "Good morning, Mr. Richard," she greeted him cheerfully. "Ethan will be thrilled to see you here." Richard smiled nervously, unsure if his presence would disrupt their usual routine. But when Ethan wheeled into the room and saw his dad sitting at the table, his face lit up with excitement. For the first time, Richard realized how much Ethan craved his attention, not because it was expected, but because it meant the world to him. Breakfast became a joyful affair, filled with laughter and playful banter. Maya encouraged Richard to feed Ethan, showing him techniques to make the process easier. At first, Richard fumbled, spilling syrup on the tablecloth and earning a chuckle from Maya. "Don't worry," she said reassuringly. "You'll get the hang of it. Just take your time." By the end of the meal, both father and son were covered in sticky pancake crumbs, but they didn't care. Richard felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced in years, a feeling of belonging, of being exactly where he was meant to be. Over time, Richard grew more confident in his role as a hands-on father. He started participating in activities Maya had introduced, like painting sessions, music therapy, and outdoor walks in the garden. One sunny afternoon, while pushing Ethan's wheelchair along a shaded path, Richard noticed something remarkable. Ethan's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he watched birds flit between trees and listened to the rustling leaves. "He loves nature, doesn't he?" Richard remarked, turning to Maya, who walked beside them. She nodded, smiling. "Yes, he does. Nature has a way of speaking to all of us, even when words fail." Inspired by this observation, Richard decided to create a small sensory garden in their backyard. With Maya's help, they planted fragrant flowers, soft grasses, and wind chimes that tinkled melodiously in the breeze. Every day after lunch, Richard and Ethan would explore the garden together, touching petals, feeling textures, and enjoying the fresh air. These quiet moments became sacred to Richard, offering him a chance to slow down and appreciate the simple pleasures of life. He often found himself thinking about how different his priorities had been just a few months ago. Back then, success had been measured in boardroom victories and financial gains. Now it was measured in Ethan's smiles and the sound of his laughter. Despite these positive changes, Richard couldn't shake off the guilt that lingered in the corners of his mind. He thought about all the years he had missed, the milestones, the bedtime stories, the hugs, and wondered if he could ever truly make up for lost time. One evening, as he tucked Ethan into bed, he voiced his fears aloud. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair off Ethan's forehead. "I wasn't there for you when you needed me most, but I promise I'll do better. I'll be here for you now." Though Ethan couldn't respond verbally, his eyes conveyed understanding and forgiveness. Richard felt a lump rise in his throat, but before he could say anything else, Maya appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Richard," she said softly, "you're doing great. Don't be too hard on yourself. What matters is that you're here now. That's what counts." Her words brought comfort, yet they also sparked a deeper conversation between them later that night. Sitting in the living room with cups of tea, Richard opened up about his struggles. "Maya, I feel like I've wasted so much time," he admitted. "I let work consume me, and I pushed my family aside. How do I fix that? How do I become the father Ethan deserves?" Maya leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Being a parent isn't about perfection, Mr. Richard. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. You're already doing that. The fact that you're asking these questions shows how much you care. And trust me, Ethan feels it. He knows you love him." Her reassurance gave Richard strength, but it also made him realize how much he still had to learn from Maya. Beyond her role as a caregiver, she was a teacher, imparting lessons about patience, resilience, and unconditional love. Their conversations often drifted toward her own experiences, revealing layers of her personality that Richard hadn't fully grasped before. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maya shared a story that left Richard deeply moved. "When I was younger," she began, "I dreamed of becoming a teacher. I wanted to inspire children, to help them believe in themselves no matter what challenges they faced. And for a while I did just that. I taught kindergarten, and those kids, they changed my life. But then the school district cut funding, and I lost my job. It broke my heart, but I refused to give up. I took whatever work I could find, including caregiving, because I knew I could still make a difference, even if it wasn't in a classroom." Richard listened intently, his admiration for Maya growing with each word. "That must have been incredibly difficult," he said, "to lose something you loved so much." "It was," Maya agreed, nodding. "But sometimes, life takes away what we hold dear to show us new paths. Working with children like Ethan reminds me why I became a teacher in the first place. Every child deserves someone who believes in them, who sees their potential even when others don't. That's what keeps me going." Her words resonated deeply with Richard. He thought about his own career, which had brought him wealth but little fulfillment. For years he had chased success without questioning its purpose. Now, inspired by Maya's passion, he began to envision a different kind of legacy, one built not on profits but on impact. One evening, during one of their heartfelt talks, Richard asked Maya a question that surprised even himself. "If you could do anything in the world, no strings attached, what would it be?" Maya paused, her gaze distant as though imagining possibilities. Finally, she replied, "I'd open a community center, a safe space for underprivileged children to learn, grow, and dream big. A place where they wouldn't have to worry about judgment or limitations, just pure opportunity." The idea struck Richard like lightning. Here was someone with a vision worth supporting, someone whose dreams aligned perfectly with his desire to give back. Without hesitation, he said, Let's make it happen. Maya blinked, startled. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said, Richard replied firmly. You've given so much to my family, to Ethan and me. Let me help you achieve your dream. Together, we can build this community center. We'll start planning tomorrow. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she processed his offer. For a moment she was speechless. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, Thank you, Mr. Richard. This means more to me than I can express. From that day forward, their partnership extended beyond the walls of the mansion. Richard threw himself into the project with the same determination he had once reserved for his business ventures. He hired architects, secured permits, and reached out to local organizations for support. Meanwhile, Maya poured her heart into designing programs that would empower children of all backgrounds. They worked tirelessly side by side, united by a shared goal to create a space where love, learning, and hope could flourish. As construction on the community center progressed, Richard noticed another shift within himself. His perspective on wealth had transformed. Money was no longer an end in itself, but a tool to make a difference. He realized that true riches weren't found in bank accounts or luxury cars. They were found in relationships, in acts of kindness, and in the joy of seeing others thrive. Watching Maya's dream come to life reinforced this belief. She had taught him that success wasn't about climbing ladders. It was about lifting others as you climbed. By the time the community center was ready for its grand opening, Richard felt a sense of pride unlike any he had known before. Standing beside Maya as she prepared to cut the ribbon, he reflected on how far they had come. From a cold, lonely mansion to a vibrant home filled with laughter, and now to a community hub brimming with potential, their journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. As cameras flashed and applause erupted around them, Richard looked at Maya and Ethan standing hand in hand and felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude. In that moment, surrounded by cheering crowds and hopeful faces, Richard understood what it meant to live a meaningful life. It wasn't about titles or trophies, it was about connection, compassion, and the courage to change. Maya had broken his heart, not with pain, but with love, and in doing so, she had mended it forever. The day of the community center's grand opening arrived, and excitement buzzed in the air like electricity. Brightly colored balloons swayed gently in the breeze, while banners with bold lettering proclaimed, "A place for every child." The once empty lot now stood transformed into a vibrant hub of hope and possibility, a testament to Maya's vision and Richard's determination. As families from all walks of life gathered outside, anticipation filled their faces. Children ran around laughing, their joy infectious, while parents exchanged smiles, grateful for a space that promised inclusion and opportunity. Richard stood near the entrance, adjusting his tie nervously. Though he had attended countless high-profile events in his corporate career, this felt different. There were no shareholders scrutinizing him, no bottom lines to defend, only people whose lives might be touched by what they had created together. He glanced at Maya, who stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wore a simple, yet elegant dress, her warm smile radiating pride and humility. Beside her, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, clapping enthusiastically as if he understood the significance of the moment. As the ceremony began, Maya stepped up to the microphone. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but soon it steadied, carrying strength and sincerity. "Today is not just about opening a building," she said, looking out at the crowd. "It's about creating a home, a place where every child can feel valued, loved, and inspired to dream big. This center exists because of teamwork, generosity, and belief in the power of community. And I want to thank one person in particular for making this dream possible, Mr. Richard." The audience erupted into applause, turning their attention to Richard. For a brief moment, he felt uncomfortable under the spotlight, unused to being celebrated for something so personal. But then he caught Maya's gaze, her eyes shining with gratitude, and he realized this wasn't about him. It was about what they had built together. Smiling warmly, he nodded in acknowledgement before stepping forward to speak. "Thank you all for coming today," Richard began, his tone heartfelt. But most importantly, thank you, Maya, for teaching me what truly matters in life. When I hired you to care for my son, I never imagined you'd end up changing our entire family. And me. You showed me that success isn't measured in dollars or titles. It's measured in connection, compassion, and impact. This center is your dream, but it's also a reminder to us all that when we work together, anything is possible. His words resonated deeply with those present, earning another round of applause. As the ribbon was cut and the doors opened, children rushed inside, eager to explore the colorful classrooms, art studios, and play areas. Richard watched them with a mixture of awe and satisfaction, marveling at how such a simple idea, a safe space for kids, could ignite so much joy. He turned to Maya, who stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, we did," Richard replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And this is just the beginning." Over the following weeks, the community center became a cornerstone of the neighborhood. Families flocked to its programs, which ranged from academic tutoring and music lessons to sports clinics and art workshops. Maya took charge of operations, her natural leadership shining through as she coordinated volunteers and ensured everything ran smoothly. Richard visited frequently, often bringing Ethan along to participate in activities tailored to his abilities. Watching Ethan interact with other children, laughing and learning alongside them, filled Richard with immeasurable pride. It was a side of his son he had never seen before, one that thrived on connection and belonging. One afternoon, as Richard helped paint a mural in the center's main hall, he struck up a conversation with a young boy named Jamal. About Ethan's age, Jamal had a curious mind and a knack for asking thought-provoking questions. "Why are you doing this?" Jamal asked, tilting his head as he dipped his brush into a bucket of blue paint. "You're rich, right? Why don't you just relax?" Richard chuckled, pausing to consider the question. "Well, Jamal," he said, after a moment, "a long time ago I thought being rich meant having nice cars and big houses, but then I met someone." He glanced over at Maya, who was helping a group of toddlers finger paint, "who taught me that real wealth comes from giving back. This center isn't just about helping others. It's about learning from them too. Like you, for example. You remind me to ask important questions." Jamal grinned, clearly pleased with the compliment. "Cool," he said, returning to his painting. Richard smiled to himself, realizing how much he had grown since meeting Maya. Conversations like these, though seemingly small, reminded him of the ripple effect kindness could create. By investing in others, he was also enriching his own life. Meanwhile, Maya continued to inspire everyone around her with her tireless dedication. She introduced innovative programs aimed at fostering creativity and confidence among participants. One initiative, called Dream Big Fridays, encouraged children to share their aspirations, whether it was becoming an astronaut, a chef, or even a superhero. Each week, Maya invited guest speakers, from local entrepreneurs to artists, to talk about their journeys and motivate the kids to pursue their passions. These sessions quickly became a highlight for many families, including Richard and Ethan. During one such session, Ethan surprised everyone by raising his hand tentatively when Maya asked if anyone wanted to share their dream. With Richard's assistance, Ethan used a communication device to express his wish. "I want to fly kites someday." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into cheers. Maya hugged Ethan tightly, her eyes glistening. "That's a beautiful dream, Ethan," she said. "And guess what? We'll make it happen. Together." True to her word, Maya organized a kite-flying event at a nearby park the following weekend. Volunteers helped set up accessible equipment, ensuring Ethan and other children with disabilities could join in the fun. As Richard held Ethan steady while Maya guided the kite string, the three of them laughed and cheered as the colorful kite soared high into the sky. For Richard, it was a moment of pure magic, a symbol of how far they had come and how much further they could go when they worked together. Despite the center's success, challenges inevitably arose. Funding remained a constant concern, requiring Richard to host fundraisers and seek additional sponsors. Occasionally, disagreements surfaced between staff members or parents, testing Maya's diplomatic skills. Yet through it all, the core mission remained unchanged: to provide a nurturing environment where every child felt seen and supported. Richard admired Maya's resilience, especially during tough times. She approached obstacles not with frustration, but with solutions, always reminding everyone that setbacks were opportunities to grow stronger. As months passed, the bond between Richard, Maya, and Ethan deepened further. They weren't just employer and employee or father and caregiver. They were a family bound by shared experiences and mutual respect. Their partnership extended beyond the community center, influencing how Richard conducted his business. Inspired by Maya's values, he implemented policies within his company to support employees with families, offering flexible hours and childcare assistance. He also established scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing careers in education, honoring Maya's original dream of becoming a teacher. One evening, as Richard and Maya sat on the porch watching the sunset, they reflected on the journey they had undertaken together. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if we hadn't crossed paths?" Richard asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Maya smiled softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "All the time," she admitted, "but I believe everything happens for a reason. You needed someone to remind you of what really matters, and I needed a chance to reignite my passion. Look at us now. We've changed each other's lives in ways neither of us could have predicted." Her words echoed in Richard's mind long after their conversation ended. He realized that Maya wasn't just a nanny or a friend. She was a guiding light who had led him out of darkness. Through her, he had rediscovered the joy of unconditional love for his son, for his community, and ultimately for himself. The scars of guilt and regret still lingered, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he had come and how much more he could achieve. By the end of the year, the community center had become a beacon of hope, not only for its participants but also for Richard and Maya personally. It represented a new chapter in their lives, one rooted in purpose, connection, and transformation. As fireworks lit up the night sky during the annual holiday celebration, Richard looked around at the smiling faces and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He reached out and squeezed Maya's hand, silently thanking her for everything she had done. In return, she gave him a knowing smile as if to say, "We're just getting started." And indeed they were. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges and triumphs, but Richard knew one thing for certain. Together, they could overcome anything. After all, they had already proven that broken hearts could heal, and sometimes they healed strongest when mended with love. As the months rolled into years, the community center flourished, becoming more than just a building. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of love, resilience, and collaboration. What had started as Maya's dream and Richard's redemption project transformed into something far greater, a cornerstone of hope for an entire community. Families who once struggled found solace within its walls, children discovered their potential, and even Richard himself continued to grow in ways he never imagined. The bond between Richard, Maya, and Ethan became unshakable. It wasn't just about shared experiences anymore. It was about a deep-rooted understanding that they were better together. Ethan thrived under the combined care of his father and Maya, achieving milestones that doctors once deemed impossible. He learned to communicate more effectively using adaptive technology, participated in group activities at the center, and developed friendships with peers who accepted him without judgment. For Richard, watching Ethan blossom into a confident and joyful young boy filled him with pride and gratitude. Every milestone, no matter how small, felt like a victory earned through patience, effort, and love. One sunny afternoon, during a storytelling session at the community center, Ethan surprised everyone by volunteering to read aloud from one of his favorite books. With Richard's help, he used his communication device to narrate the tale of a brave knight overcoming obstacles. The room fell silent as Ethan's voice, synthesized but full of emotion, filled the air. When he finished, Applause erupted, echoing off the walls. Ethan beamed, his face glowing with accomplishment. Maya wiped away tears, her heart swelling with pride. "That's my boy," Richard whispered, hugging Ethan tightly. In that moment, they weren't just celebrating Ethan's progress. They were celebrating the journey that had brought them here. But life wasn't without its challenges. As the community center grew, so did the demands placed on Maya and Richard. Funding remained a constant concern, requiring creative solutions and relentless advocacy. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them both, but they leaned on each other, drawing strength from their shared purpose. Maya often reminded Richard that setbacks were temporary, urging him to focus on the bigger picture. "We're planting seeds," she would say. "Some will grow quickly, others slowly, but every seed matters." Richard took these lessons to heart, applying them not only to the center but also to his personal life. His relationship with Ethan evolved further, becoming richer and more meaningful. They spent weekends exploring parks, museums, and libraries, creating memories that neither of them would ever forget. One Saturday morning, while visiting an aquarium, Ethan pointed excitedly at a dolphin leaping out of the water. Richard laughed, snapping photos and marveling at how much joy simple moments could bring. Later that evening, as they sat side by side eating ice cream cones, Richard realized something profound. Happiness wasn't about grand gestures or expensive vacations. It was about connection, the kind that made ordinary moments extraordinary. Meanwhile, Maya's influence extended beyond the center and into Richard's professional life. Inspired by her values, he restructured his company to prioritize social responsibility. Employees were encouraged to volunteer at the center, and partnerships were formed with local schools and nonprofits to provide resources for underserved communities. Richard even launched a foundation dedicated to supporting caregivers and educators like Maya, recognizing the vital role they played in shaping futures. These changes didn't go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once viewed Richard as distant and driven solely by profit began to see him in a new light, as someone committed to making a difference. Maya, too, experienced personal growth. Her confidence soared as she saw the impact of her work firsthand. She mentored aspiring teachers, sharing her knowledge and passion with those eager to follow in her footsteps. Yet despite her success, she remained humble, always reminding herself of why she started this journey. "It's not about me," she told Richard one evening as they prepared for another fundraising gala. "It's about the kids, their dreams, their futures. If we can give them even half the chances I've been given, we'll have done our job." The gala turned out to be a resounding success, raising enough funds to expand the center's programs and facilities. As Richard stood on stage delivering the closing remarks, he looked out at the crowd, families, volunteers, donors, and felt a surge of emotion. "When we opened this center, I thought it was about giving back," he said, his voice steady yet filled with feeling. "But what I've come to realize is that it's about receiving too. Through you, through all of you, I've learned what it means to truly live, to connect, to care, and for that I will forever be grateful." His words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation. As the lights dimmed and guests mingled afterward, Maya approached Richard, her eyes shining. "You've come such a long way," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Richard smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And I couldn't have done any of it without you, Maya. You saved us. You saved me." Their partnership had blossomed into something rare and beautiful, a friendship built on trust, mutual respect, and shared purpose. Though they came from vastly different backgrounds, they complemented each other perfectly. Richard provided resources and opportunities while Maya offered wisdom, compassion, and unwavering dedication. Together, they proved that true change happens when people unite for a common cause. Years later, as Ethan entered adolescence, he continued to defy expectations. With the support of his family and the community center, he pursued his passions, art, music, and technology, with boundless enthusiasm. His kite-flying dream had sparked a fascination with aerodynamics, leading him to design model airplanes and participate in science fairs. Watching Ethan present his projects at school events, Richard couldn't help but marvel at how far they had all come. Maya often joked that Ethan might become an engineer someday, and though Richard chuckled at the idea, he secretly hoped it would come true. On Ethan's 16th birthday, Richard organized a special celebration at the community center. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered to honor the boy who had inspired so many. As Maya handed Ethan a handmade scrapbook filled with photos and mementos from over the years, tears welled up in Richard's eyes. "This place wouldn't exist without you, buddy," he said, pulling Ethan into a tight embrace. "You remind us every day that anything is possible if we believe." Ethan responded by pressing a button on his communication device, which played a pre-recorded message. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Maya. I love you." The room erupted in cheers, and Maya hugged Ethan tightly, whispering, "We love you too, sweetheart. Always." In the years that followed, the community center continued to thrive, touching countless lives. Maya eventually passed the torch to a younger generation of leaders, confident that her legacy would endure. Richard retired from his corporate career, dedicating himself fully to philanthropy and spending more time with Ethan. Their home, once cold and empty, remained filled with laughter, music, and warmth, a reflection of the love that had transformed. Looking back on their journey, Richard realized that hiring Maya hadn't just changed Ethan's life, it had changed his own. She had broken his heart not with pain but with love, forcing him to confront his shortcomings and rediscover what truly mattered. Through her, he had learned that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in relationships, kindness, and the ability to make a difference. And though Maya eventually moved on to pursue new adventures, leaving behind a lifetime of memories, Richard knew she would always hold a special place in his heart. As he sat on the porch one evening, watching Ethan paint a sunset-inspired masterpiece, Richard felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't turned out the way he had planned, but it had turned out exactly the way it was meant to. Broken hearts could heal, scars could fade, and love could mend even the deepest wounds. All it took was courage, connection, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected, and for Richard, Maya, and Ethan, that was enough.